analysing 18th century history, so literature. So,
yes.
over to you.
Okay, well, I'm particularly thrilled to be here because this is a story that sort of began and ended in Russia, really. So I came across this extraordinary woman in Simon Sebag, one of Europe's book, Catherine the Great, and Potemkin. And I was sort of, I don't know how many people have read that wonderful book, but there we were in St. Petersburg, and it's all very interesting. And suddenly this sort of lunatic Duchess turned up on this extraordinary boat, and he said, teasing me, I say in a slightly misogynist way, he said this old lunatic drunk turned up, she was on the run from England, she was in terrible trouble, she was in disgrace, and she'd spent all this money that she'd stolen on her husband's family to build this event to try and ingratiate herself with Catherine the Great, which was sort of true, and fascinating, but I also wanted to work out what was going on behind it. So I started reading about this woman who I'd never heard of, and I discovered a very sort of complicated story that had been told and told again in the same way without really going onto the surface. And just as I was getting to the end of this project, the wonderful Hermitage UK, the news reached me that her belongings were going on display in St. Petersburg. So I'd actually already finished the book, and that's actually rewrite a whole chunk of it. So I turned up and was amazed to see that the best preserved parts of her belongings anywhere were in St. Petersburg. Yeah, in spite of a quarter of a millennium, the siege of Leningrad, the exile in the Urals, there was her things, the silver wine cooler that Potemkin had served fish soup out of in Gaul, and as you say, that miraculous chandelier. I stood next to it and it was taller than me, which is, I would say, not much wrong. And when you lit the candles of this thing, it turned round and played music. It was a real sort of wondrous piece of engineering for the time. That's the Russia side, and that came sort of towards the end of my life. And one of the reasons I was so interested in this story is that it was a story of a woman who'd been dreadfully humiliated in England, and Russia is sort of where she tried with partial success and a lot of sort of ostentatious sort of magnificence, which the trail is still in the Hermitage, to sort of rehabilitate herself. But the story in England really focuses on this extraordinary trial, which was April 1776, a really pivotal time in English history, where we're just about to lose the War of Independence. And it really is, it's sort of difficult to explain when you're writing a book. It's easier when you're talking about it, really. But it really is the last moment at which we could have won the war, although England was incredibly divided, as you probably know about, whether we wanted to win it or lose it. But the Howell brothers, who were great friends of hers, were waiting to go to America and see if they could negotiate with George Washington and try and calm the whole situation down. And they were arguing about the details of the terms that they could agree. And unbelievably, for those who underestimate the power of the English love of gossip and tabloids, just a great big fun scandal, this all got parked for the trial of the Duchess of Kingston. I couldn't quite believe it when I read it, but it really was true. They all said, well, America can wait, because we're going to take this woman and we're going to put her on trial at vast expense. So the whole of Westminster Hall, I don't know how many been there, enormous, place to see coronation dinners and trials of kings, anyway, it was re-kitted out, and 4,000 people, including James Boswell, 3 monarchs. There's a wonderful historical link, because you've got Queen Victoria's father standing there, aged 6, watching the trial. So you sort of go through the Hanoverian line. Half of the cabinet, including the Secretary of War, who should have been dealing with America, but was himself a witness, so he couldn't, came to watch her being humiliated, really, and they unpicked this very peculiar, unfortunate story of a woman who was a bigamist and was convicted of bigamy, but had done it by accident, really, through misfortune and on a whim, and through the vagaries of the English law, which as a result of this spectacular trial was changed forever. But perhaps if I go back a bit earlier than that, although that's the sort of headline, and that's the part of my life that was most written about, because it became a newspaper sensation, and that was another reason why I became interested in her, was as a journalist, or former journalist, writing another book now, but she was probably the earliest celebrity. Even before that, she was famous for just being famous. She had been a maid of honour to Princess Augusta, Princess of Wales, and to attract attention. I don't know how many people saw the pictures from Met Ball the other night, but really we think all these things are new, and they're not, these girls turning up in sort of one of those Jenna girls, I don't really know, and everyone turn up in this dress, and from a distance it looked like she wasn't wearing anything. So this one got there first, 1749, there she was on the equivalent of the red carpet on a look at me dress, and although there weren't any photographers, it had exactly the same effect. Everybody wrote about her, everyone was either scandalised or all over her, and it had a very sort of practical result, which is the king gave her mother a job, which was necessary because her mother was a widow, she didn't have any money. So that was a sort of fantastic kind of turn of events for her, but at the time it was her first scandal, probably. So she'd been born into that sort of Jane Austen type world of connections and sort of upper class life, but no money. So her father was the deputy governor at Chelsea Royal Hospital. Beautiful Wren building just on the river. There was no road, of course, then between the embankment and the garden, so it really was children's paradise. But when she was 5, the father, who was a poor cousin of quite grand family, died, and they moved to Mayfair. They went into rented accommodation, and then her brother died, and through a man called William Pulteney, who became England's shortest lived Prime Minister. So basically he was asked by the king to form a government, and nobody wanted to support him. So within 48 hours, he had to go back to the king and tell him his legs and say, I can't let you want to go with me. And so it was the silly little ministry. It's very complicated. Anyway, this poor man did do this wonderful thing, which is he introduced her to the Princess of Wales, and that was her big break. So she became, as you were saying, Janice, an early age girl. There were these maids of honour, and everyone was successful. The newspapers wrote about them all the time. What were they wearing? Where were they going? Were their jokes funny? And most importantly, who were they going to marry? So the court of Frederick, Prince of Wales, was really a marriage market. Single girls, single men, all congregated there. And the aim of someone like Elizabeth was just to find a husband. So the first person she fell in love with was the Scottish Duke. And fortunately for her, as anyone who watched British will relate to, he was an orphan duke, which was even better because there was no family to object, no close family. However, the wider family did object, and he was sent on a 10-year grand tour to get him out of her clutches. So then she went met someone else on the rebound, and this is where the problem started, because she married this very dashing young sailor, Augustus Harvey. Very late at night at this wonderful chapel in Hampshire, a place called Ladiesville House. You can still see the chapel today. It's a sort of tiny ruin, but it must have been magical. It's kind of in this wonderful garden. It's sort of red brick, and it's really sort of charming. You can see how she will get carried away and just the bonfire or something you on an August night. But he became, in his own right, a very interesting naval hero, and his diary is still in print. And he was also known as the English Casanova, and he really was quite entertainingly shot in the way he carried on around Europe. It was sort of unbelievable, but he was also, his recklessness was also brave. He did incredible things in the name of the Royal Navy, but he was a terrible husband. And married on a whim, within weeks they were fed up with each other. I think he went to the West Indies for 2 years. They'd only known each other for a few days when they got married. And he went away for 2 years. And by the time they came back, they had no means of supporting themselves. He was a younger son. She only had the salary as maid of honour, and you couldn't be a maid of honour if you got married. If you got married, it was a maid position. So she had to lie to hold on to her salary. And they very sort of agreed to pretend that it hadn't happened, which would have been fine, were it not for the fact that there were people who knew and they couldn't pay them off. The servants basically were in the church, and one of them, she should have paid her off forever, perhaps, but didn't, and the whole plan became sort of collapsed after a few years. This is getting a little complicated, isn't it? But it is a complicated story. I won't tell the whole thing now, but
No, because they got to my book.
because you've got to find it. But anyway, so in comes this wonderful second husband, handsomest man in England, Duke of Kingston. Hence Horace Walpole, the great diarist who chronicles the 18th century like nobody else. Very gratifying with his stories, 4,000 letters, endless diaries. His nickname was the Duchess Countess because she found herself married to the Duke of Kingston. The naval younger son, meanwhile, through a series of events, had become the Earl of Bristol, as his older brother died without children. So she was a Duchess and a Countess, although she never admitted to the second part. And word got round after he died, and then it turned into something very familiar in history, which is an inheritance battle, which is what it basically was. So you have a sort of tabloid scandal meeting in an inheritance battle. A famous woman, known for being very beautiful, not always wearing very much, but also being very witty and having a wonderful way with everybody. So she was very popular, she was around, she was asked to a party. And then she married this man who had a sister who married someone who, strangely enough, shares a bloodline with King Middleton. Did you see that bit? Yes, the Meadows family, which is, yes, the Meadows family. So the brother-in-law of Kingston, who was meant to be this terrible gold digger. Anyway, he's an ancestor of one Middleton's which is completely irrelevant. But so this family thought that all the money would go to them, and he did, but he wrote a will in which he left it to her. Vast estates across the north of England and a whole, and sort of most of central Bath, actually, an unbelievable amount of land and number of houses. And he said, well, after she dies, it can go to my nephews. But then he really wound up by disinheriting the oldest nephew, because the oldest nephew had gone around London borrowing money, saying he was the next Duke of Kingston, which he wasn't anyway, because it was the sister's son. So he crossed him off. And this Evelyn Pierpont, the nephew, was so angry, he went on a sort of lifelong bid for revenge on this woman. I will prove that she's a pickfist and I will get the money. And then the whole story turned into a battle of wills, but he did succeed in getting her into court. He got the servant who'd been at the wedding to say she'd been married. Technically, he won. Then Lord Mansfield, really I'm telling the whole story, I don't know. But anyway, Lord Mansfield of Pembroke House, anyone's been there, the great lawyer of the 18th century, stepped in, you will know, and said, okay, well, yes, she's been found guilty, but he wanted to leave her all his money anyway, and he could leave his money to whoever he wanted. and he knew her entire story, and he signed her, so the will stands. So they'd spent 12 years trying to organise this enormous occasion, a vast expense, absolute obsession, and they proved that she was a linguist, and she kept all the money. Incredibly sort of strange but rather wonderful turn of events, really. And with this money, she commissioned an enormous yacht, and she'd been told, okay, you can keep the money, but you can't use the title of Duchess of Kingston. You're not the Duchess of Kingston. And so she went into self-imposed exile. And this is where we come to Russia. So she commissioned the enormous yacht, and she named it the Duchess of Kingston. And she sailed it up to Peterhof on the way to St. Petersburg. And she had an orchestra, and animals, and a French crew, and 2 chaplains. She had a French crew because the English crew all resigned en masse because they had to go under the French flag because of the War of Independence. 2 priests, monkeys. It's a pretty strange thing I don't know. Monkeys had lots of baby monkeys on board, I mean, my marbles, but anyway, parrots, and yes, there was an orchestra. And she sailed up, and wanted to make this grand entrance, and then the boat got stuck at Peterhof.
For those of you that have been, you can imagine the yacht was so large, it was too large to sail down a river from Peterhof to St. Petersburg, which, if you think hovercrafts go up there.
Yes, yes. So this boat ride, and then Chernyshev, who was her friend, he was a naval officer, but he'd been ambassador in London, so she befriended him. And at this point, she'd already been rejected by most of the courts in Europe. Her obsession was to find another royal court where she would be introduced as the Duchess of Kingston, she could use that title. So she tried Vienna, and the Holy Roman Emperor wasn't having any of it, and she tried Frederick the Great. And the English ambassador always got in the way and would say, you can't receive as the Duchess of Kingston, it's been decided at Westminster Hall that that's not her title. So, not being somebody to give up that easily, she tried another route, but she sent 2 paintings ahead to Chernyshev, who was now running the Admiralty College in St. Petersburg. And the unwritten agreement was, you keep these masterpieces, in return for which you introduce them to Catherine the Great. And that is exactly what happened. So he took the paintings, and then he came to pick her up from Peterhof when the boat was stuck, took her in, and then she was taken off to the Summer Palace, where she was introduced to Catherine the Great, who sat her at her right hand and took her into the theatre and watched a play, and gave her the apartments that the King of Sweden had just been staying in. And at which point, everybody in St. Petersburg saw that she'd been accepted by Catherine and Potemkin, who were in a sort of phase of great anger figure and were fascinated by her. And they also, being open-minded, sort of, they loved the scandal. They read the stories of her in the English press, and they wanted to meet her. They thought was what other people thought we can't touch. They thought was fun and interesting, and they also wanted to know about her art. Potemkin was, I'm sure many of you know, obsessed with sort of art and manufacturing and sculptures and engineering, and he wanted to know everything that she knew. For example, long discussions with all that about the peacock clock, how did he meet James Cox? And James Cox was her great friend, and she was his sort of promoter in Russia. So we don't have to prove, but I think she probably introduced him to that, and that wonderful thing, which I'm sure many of you can see in the Hermitage Commission temple. She also bought the garden over from Washington, almost as a present for Catherine. He was called Henry and made these beautiful English gardens, and Catherine was obsessed with her garden. So she presented him to her, and he stayed there forever. And so obsessed with Russia did she become that she bought this crazy project in what is now Estonia. So very remote even then. I mean, now it would take a good 4 hours to go to from St. Petersburg, I think, by road. But that was like going to the moon. But she bought 3 neighbouring estates on the Baltic coast of Estonia, and and she decided to turn it into a sort of garden and a vodka distillery and to set up taverns. And this was a project that actually ended up going dislodged and that took on too much. But it is a sign of how obsessed she was with Russia, really, which suited her very much. And sorry.
Fascinated by this.
Great. So yes, I'm sort of getting lost in Russia really, but what I wanted to, the other thing I wanted to say really about this tournament is why should we care about having a house? So I talked about how we saw their things in the Hermitage, but there's also, I think, a sort of idea at the moment where everyone talks about social media, it's so aggressive, people anonymously attack each other, what we do about it. And one of the things that I think history serves us so well is that we put things in context. What is new about human nature and what is a long-standing sort of characteristic? And one of the things that struck me when I was writing this was how the medium changes, but the message doesn't. So the savagery, 18th century wit isn't particularly known for that, but journalism, gossip, whatever you want. But it was anonymous as well. These pamphlets going around that would attack the government or people, and we still don't know who wrote half of them. I mean, people guess, Junius, for example, brought down governments, but nobody ever knew exactly who it was. There was a theory, obviously, that it was Augustus Harvey, the first husband, both sides, and these sort of the sheer sort of love of gossip and rumour and sort of taking down of important people, and how it's sort of amusing and energetic and sort of savage all at the same time. And I think that's just a sort of constant in society, and social media has given it this very sort of unfortunate immediacy. And yet, in another way, how similar it is to this story.
So not much has changed.
No, not much has.
Same media as well as the social.
Yeah, exactly. And it had the same sort of immediacy. And if you take a child, people would go off and they would write everything that had happened, and then the next day you get these completely conflicting reports because each side will pay the journalist. So it was in the sense that it was worse because people were being paid off. And the other thing that was exactly as it is now is the role of publicists and public relations executives. Sounds new, but she had a sort of team of press officers. Oddly, they were always clergymen because they were incredibly educated and literate, but they weren't very well paid. So they would double up as PRs. And she always had one near her. There was a variety of, and they would write wonderful reports about her life. And this carried on. One was on the boat with her when she went to Russia. And in the London newspapers, they would read about how glorious her entrance into St. Petersburg was. No mention of boat being into the boat, obviously, all of that got sort of ironed out. And so, yeah, so again, that's something that is just sort of there in England. I mean, what luckily for us isn't there is this sort of nightmare of the marriage laws, because the state of marriage moved through the 18th century from a sort of dynastic arrangement to a sort of personal romantic alliance. Partly this sort of belief over this 100-year span between 1700 and 1800 is very influenced by the novel. Not really female writers yet, because Jane Austen comes a bit later. Fanny Burney's just at the end. But Richardson and people started writing about women's inner lives, and it was a revelation, really, that these beings had thoughts and feelings, and maybe they weren't really, suddenly it was acknowledged that perhaps there should be some choice about the matter. But this wasn't smoothly done for various reasons. The Marriage Act was very complicated, and nobody could agree what the state of marriage should be. What should children of families be able to marry whoever they wanted, or did it need parental sign-off? And after Elizabeth's case, William Pulteney, the man of the rather silly little ministry, introduced to court in 1753 the idea that marriage wasn't a watertight institution. And it was the longest, even though we have the beginning of empire, the rise of the Royal Navy in North America, this is the most debated act of the entire 19th century. They argued about it for over a year. And it was really about what can constitute legal marriage. And eventually they come up with this idea. It's quite a watertight idea, actually, that we still have, which is the door should be open. It's a public event. You can't hide it from everyone. You need at least 2 witnesses so that nobody can lie, because it used to be you could be married through a promise. One person just had to say to the other one in the present tense, I marry you. And that, of course, what happened when the other person said, I never said it. You know, that was absolute chaos. So 2 witnesses, reading of the banns, which used to have to be the parish of bride and groom, and canonical hours, so there had to be certain hours during which you get married. Because Elizabeth's first wedding, like so many, was late at night, there were no banns, neither parish nor bride and groom, and there were witnesses, there was technically a priest, but it was very uncertain about whether it was legal or not. And so, from that sense, she changed history because her mentor went to fight for her. His great idea was that anything that was uncertain should be completely different, which would have resulted in thousands of people's marriages suddenly being sort of annulled. So that didn't happen. We didn't get that one through. But yes. So there we are. There are lots of areas we can go into here in Russia.
No, as I was saying to Catherine, she mentioned earlier, to me, reading the book, you know, she certainly the it girl in her day. And also, when you read the book and you read about the yacht, I mean, she had every technical gadget you can possibly think. Anyway, so please ask Catherine any questions.
I have a question. Yes. Firstly, I'm very glad that the laws have changed, because my 6-year-old son would now be married 3 or 4 times. I was interested in the paintings that were sent ahead.
Yes.
I'm sure it's included in the book, and forgive me
Yes.
not to read it. But what are they, if we know?
Okay, so yes, well, do you remember we went on this great hunt to track them down? We were so excited. So one was Claude Lorraine, and it wasn't actually on display, but it was still there. It was a wonderful picture. It was in storage, like so many things. And the other one was very tantalising because it said that it was a Raphael, but I don't think it was actually. I think it was something else. And there were lots of misattributions then. And also, people have this wonderful thing where they just make up stories. I don't know if anyone's been to Strawberry Hill, but Horace and the Poles thing, they say, they get a ring, and they say, this ring was worn by Mary on the scaffold or something. And people just sort of said anything about anything. So when they said, oh, it's a Raphael, you know, you aren't quite sure, well, maybe it was. And
The art market is still doing that today. It's not
and in her will, there's a thing, this is in the book, but maybe for anyone who's read it has noticed this, where she says, I want to leave a Raphael snuff box to the Pope. And so the lawyer goes off to see the Pope, and he says, she's left you a snuff box. This is how wonderful. And then somebody says, Raphael didn't paint snuff boxes. This is absolutely nonsense. So they work out it's just a sort of little trinket. But there are a couple of other some wonderful paintings of hers in Hermitage that it might have been, but it's definitely that one.
We still don't know which one.
I still don't know which one.
Did she buy them, or she already owned them?
They were left to her by the husband. I mean, there is an argument that the husband's sort of nephew's descendants still make, that they should have gone with the estate, and that they should still be in Nottinghamshire, because she was left over with these things for her lifetime. But actually, she so hated these nephews with reason that she rolled up all these pictures and shoved them in the yacht and floated. So basically stripped the house in Nottinghamshire and took St. Petersburg, where lots of it still is. So when I went to see the relation in Nottinghamshire, he said, first thing he said to me was, the clock should be mine. And I said, well, you know, they say that they're not even sure that she had anything to do with that. He said, well, they wouldn't say that, would they?
The famous peacock clock. But she was very, not to give away too much, so that you will buy a book. But she was very prepared, wasn't she? Thinking that, so she was prepared in case she was found guilty. So she got everything packed up.
Yes.
And ready to dash to France.
Yes, the trial, you know, I think in the end, it was inevitable she was going to be found guilty. So she laid out everything. She even got the cousin going around London in a carriage pretending to be her, so that no one would realise she was on her way to France. And she sort of got in an open boat. She got in a sort of rowing boat with, and went there sort of in the dead of night and suddenly arrived sort of in Calais, and never set foot on English soil ever again. It was very sad. I think when she was in Estonia, she was trying to rebuild her childhood home in Devon, where she'd grown up. Her father had this lovely sort of house in Devon. She was very used to the coast, and she tried to build an English garden, but unfortunately it was on top of a cliff on Bonsick, and it was very windy, and it didn't really work. But you could see what she was. You could see what the ambition was.
Questions?
Did she leave any descendants? Or did she have any children?
Well, she did. Very sad. She had one son, but he died very young, so she had no descendants. And the son was with the first husband when they briefly reunited. Because she wasn't admitting she was married to him, the baby was born and died in secret. So it was horrendous. She could never tell anyone. And her behaviour really changed after that, actually. She was very often where she just sort of pass out whenever there was, if she was at the theatre and somebody fell over, she would fall over too. I spoke to the psychiatrist about it, and he said she'd got such a fear of death after this traumatic episode that she sort of developed this disorder. So I started writing about what that might have been. Which was quite controversial actually. A couple of the reviews like, hang on, you can't diagnose somebody 250 years old, which of course you can't, but I just thought it was such an odd thing that she would go to these various events and just faint on the spot. And was trying to work out, was that psychosomatic, was it psychological? But no, she didn't have any descendants, which is probably one of the reasons I was so moved when I saw that chandelier, because I was sort of looking for something that remained, and there was this thing, and it was so sort of beautiful and ostentatious and in Russia, and it hung on the ceiling of her ballroom, and you could just sort of photograph. So that there are relations who go down the second husband's line, the Netherlands line, and even then, they're very distant cousins, actually. They've adopted the name of Pierpont. And that house is now a Warner Leisure Hotel, and it's illegal to burn down today. But they have various things, the things she didn't take this about.
Could I ask,
Yes.
her case took place in Westminster Hall, is that because she had to be judged by her peers, had she been a peers?
Yes,
So
so
it was a civil case or criminal case?
it was a criminal case, but you've hit on something very interesting, which is that ironically, because they believed that she was a bigamist, she was a peeress either way. If she was guilty, she was a bigamist. If she was guilty, she was a peeress, because she was the Countess of Bristol. And if she was innocent, she was a peeress. She was the Duchess of Kingston. So So that meant she had the right to a trial by peers. But unfortunately, they were also fed up with arguing about the War of Independence, I think, that they moved it and they all decided to judge her. So she had a jury of 140 peers. And they all stood up at the end of the case. I've already given away what the verdict was, but each one of them stood up, sort of took his hat off and said, guilty, apart from one, her great friend, the Duke of Newcastle, who said, guilty, but not like exactly. She wasn't but yes, so no, it was a criminal case. So technically, punishment could have been being branded on the hand, but Lord Mansfield persuaded everybody to believe that you could have something called benefit of clergy or benefit of peerage, which is your first offence. You didn't have to have the punishment, which was hardly likely to do it again. But
so there wasn't a sentence.
no, there was no sentence. The only sentence as well was that she couldn't use her title. They felt there was a feeling that being found guilty in that setting and not being allowed to use her title was enough. And then the civil case followed. So then the family said, right, she's a bigamist. Now the will must be invalid. And then they must be invalid. And they followed the civil case.
But she could be the Countess of Bristol.
Yes, but she didn't use that. She didn't want to be. She never admitted that that was a marriage. She didn't really believe that it was a valid marriage. And from 1753 onwards, she's been right. It wasn't a valid marriage, really. So she was never going to call herself that, and she never did. Yeah, and then the civil case was one. So it's complicated.
More questions? Just maybe go.
Yeah.
Amazing, fantastic, thank you so much.
Oh,
And now,
pleasure.
for next few days. And I hope that you have enough.
Oh, well, not yet. Funnily enough, it is being translated into Estonian, so that's great.
That's very efficient.
Yes, exactly. But not Russian yet, as far as I know. But I hope it will be.
I hope,
Yeah.
because it's so interesting. It's like, she changed a lot. And
Yes.
if we can take like nothing changed really in like, human life, human nature,
Yes.
nothing changed.
No.
We have changes in fashion, in some technology, but in human nature, everything.
I know. I completely agree. It's
I
fascinating.
can assure you will enjoy reading it. I was reading it to and from coming to the office on the bus, and I was so enthralled I went straight past my bus stop.
Because the style, I like your style is amazing.
Oh, thank you. You're so kind.
Are we allowed to ask what you're working on next, or is that a state secret?
Well, I'll just tell you a tiny bit. It's rather mad. It's a different period in a different country. It's about a family in Paris, so painted by Renoir, and what happened to them between 1880 and the Second World War.
Wow.
More than that, but it's fun for art lovers,
Will you come back and tell us about that?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Yeah, I love writing about things that are to do with art and objects and the stories that they hold when you look at them, which is so much more than you get if you don't know anything about them.
The court case must cost her a lot of money.
Yes, the court case. Do you know what it cost her sanity? Really, it was years and years of her being pursued across Europe by lawyers' letters, and the majority, and she did hire very expensive lawyers. It cost the British state more money, actually, just to put everything in insane amounts of money. You know, to put up the seating in that hall alone and suspending traffic and a mounted guard to make sure that everybody could go in and out, and you know, the Duke and Castle Bay on food every day and the whole royal family coming, and it was unbelievable. It was sort of on the scale of a sort of royal wedding or something now, really. So yes, she spent a lot, but the state spent even more. Yeah, yes, so gladiatorial entertainment, really.
I must have missed something because I didn't realise the meadows came in.
Yes, I think that was just a tiny footnote for some reason.
You say she died in Estonia, so she never came back to England.
No, she died. She never came back to England, but she died in Paris, actually. Yeah, just a few months before the revolution started. She died in the lodging in Paris. She had a fight. Let's give it away again, but whatever, it doesn't matter. But the ending is very complicated because it goes on for years afterwards. Everyone fights over her things. But she was building a house in Paris, and she had a fight with the builders, and it went to
Nothing new,
the subtitle should have been Duchess Countess, nothing new. Anyway, so she went to the court and sued them, and the French court found against her. They found her illegal, and she was so angry that she sort of burst a blood vessel, and that was it. She, terrible. They came out with it, had a glass of Madeira, and she passed.
I've got builders in my house.
How old was she? 67, so she born 1721.
So taking research because I mean it's extraordinary in detail.
Oh, so nice. Well, okay, so I signed a contract in 2017, and then it was meant to come out last year, but got put back because of COVID. And I'd done a lot of reading about it before then, and I had just finished it when I went to Russia and saw all this fantastic stuff, and I only sort of rewrote it. So it sort of took 3 or 4 years to kind of
Did you get to like her more as you read it?
Yes, I kept thinking she was like just a really kind of wonderful but slightly annoying friend. She was incredibly entertaining, full of stories, asks for your advice, never listens to any of it. So, you know, I found her sort of, I was completely enchanted and irritated by her. I was like, you know, she's my own worst enemy, but sort of fascinating. I had endless sympathy for her, but I also began to sort of, those sorts, you know, she was just, I thought she was just a wonderful character. Her strength was her weakness, you know, she never gave up, and, you know, she was very resilient and very brave, but also she would listen to anybody, and she sort of, you know, but thank you so much for coming. I say that, yeah, I say that too.
Both say that.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes,
Sorry. Just Dennis was introducing me briefly, but I was dealing with the recording. So I became a director longer ago than I realised, because it feels like yesterday, but of course COVID meant that I'm face-to-face new to the foundation. But I just wanted to say, firstly, thank you very much for the fantastic talk. Thank you to Janice for organising it. Janice also runs our Friends programme, which many of you are members of, but for those that aren't, and you may have been invited by Pushkin House, I strongly encourage you to join, because the benefits that Janice's programme provides is, if you were to sort of monetarily work it out across the year, you'd be saving yourself thousands of pounds on VIP tickets here, there and everywhere. And it's largely due to Janice's year in, year out work on the relationships that she has with the institutions. But you know, it's a fantastic program, and I would encourage you to join. It also gets you, access to St. Petersburg, to the Hermitage through the back door, and all sorts of other wonderful benefits. But also thank you to our young friends, who I can see some of at the back, who have come along tonight. And the Young Friends of the Hermitage Foundation is our newest group. which is completely free to join. It's aimed at those 18 to 35 or in full-time education. So if you know of other people that are in that category that would be interested to join, please send them our way, or they can go to our website and sign up there. Nobody needs to be sort of, you know, a PhD scholar in art history. Just some interest in art, museums, Russia is clearly a benefit. But the group is fantastic. It's dynamic. They've got ideas flowing. They've got a WhatsApp group. They've met twice so far on Zoom. They're meeting up again face to face before the end of the year. So I would encourage you please to spread the word. And I want that to be as accessible and open to anybody that wants to join. And that's why it's free, so that we can try and reach as many people as we can. So thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you for organising Janet.
And making me blush. In actual fact, it's true that the membership, not to be boastful, is a very good membership. I can say so. In fact, I can't claim gift aid because you get more benefit than you pay.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you. I look forward to seeing you at the next event. And anyone who can come to Paris to see the opening of Laura's art exhibition next week, it's not too late. You can email me tonight. Otherwise, the next thing is 25th of September, going to Houghton Hall to see Tony Crabbe at Houghton Hall. Lord Cholmondeley, who's one of our trustees, is at Houghton. He is building this amazing sculpture park and has had Damien Hirst there, and Nish Kapoor, Richard Long, and it's now got Tony Crabbe. And so the sculptures are both within Houghton Hall, so you can see inside his wonderful home, and then scattered around the gardens.
With its strong links with the Hermitage, of course, with Walpole, and also we took Tony Crabbe to St. Petersburg. It's lots of links.
Yeah.
It'll be a good day out.
Yes.
We should let everyone go.